Okay guys, what I'm going to do for you is give you some basic information and some tips that are really going to help you with your response writing in exams. Unfortunately, history has shown us kids, knowledge-wise, that should be on a 70 or an 80, can get 50% or below purely because their exam technique is really bad. What I'm trying to get from you is to learn how to separate yourself from the others. What this will allow you to do is actually impress the marker, and it will make the marker want to give you marks. Unfortunately, guys, as a marker, when you are reading a paper, if it's well structured, has clear information, and it's easy to read, we're more likely to give you marks because we don't have to search for the correct information. Don't lose simple marks either. A lot of you will lose marks just off silly mistakes. You have to avoid this. And the final thing is, give no reason for the marker to take marks away. Okay, things like not writing clear information, not including enough, or not following what the question wants you to do. These are the reasons why a marker might not give you marks, so you have to avoid that as much as possible. Bit of structure about the WACE exam. It's 100 marks, thereabouts. Last year's exam, or 2013, was 95 marks. It's around 100 marks, though. 2.5 hours. Those of you that are good at maths will work out that's around a minute and a half per mark. Generally, I say try to get your multiple choice down to less than a minute. That will then give you more time to work on your short answer and your extended answer. One thing to be aware of, in the extended answer, you have 4 possible questions and you have to answer 2. Make sure you answer 2. Okay, we have kids sometimes answering just 1, or we have kids answering 3 and 4. Just answer 2 and make sure that the 2 you do are written to your best capabilities. Multiple choice questions. I'm going to keep this quick and simple. Firstly, read the question slowly and carefully. Okay, the question will give you hints about what the correct answer is. Make sure you read all possible answers. Okay, identify all incorrect options once you've read through them. So just tick off or put a cross through the ones that are wrong. And then from what's left over, select the most appropriate answer. So look at the one that has the most detail and is most relevant to the question. Here's an example, runner spikes aim 2. First thing I do, read the question slowly and carefully while I've done that. Okay, and what the question's trying to do is tell me what's the purpose of wearing spikes. So I read all possible answers. Decrease friction, decrease drag, increase friction, increase momentum. So I'm going to now identify all incorrect options. Well, I know it's not decrease friction. I know it's not decreasing drag. It definitely is involved with increasing friction. Well, with increasing momentum, the whole point of wearing spikes is so that we move faster and our momentum increases. So technically, it is correct. However, the main purpose is to actually increase our friction on the track to increase our ground reaction force. So therefore, the correct answer would definitely be C. Short answers. First thing, read the question slowly and carefully. Sometimes the question gives you clues about what we want to see in your response. So it could be the way the question's worded or the key words. So things like explain and describe, compare and contrast. One thing I'm going to add in here, guys, where it says identify. If it says identify, purely state what it is. So if it says identify one acute response to exercise, purely state increased heart rate or increased respiratory rate. You don't have to define it, explain it, just say what it is. If there's a question that asks you to draw a graph or a diagram, you need to make sure you label it. Okay, include all titles, units, keys, correct form, and label your axis. Okay, it's basic Year 9 science to do this, but if you don't do it, you can lose marks. Let's now look at a few things to do with the types of questions that are asked. If it's a question to do with explain or describe, these are pretty similar, so you don't have to change too much about how you would answer them. However, the first thing you need to do is provide as much detail about your keywords. So in your answer, you're probably going to have 3 to 6 keywords that you're going to have to talk about. Provide us with a definition and as much detail about them as you can. Okay. If the word explain comes up, you then have to, unfortunately, I'm going to have to say it again, but just explain why you've included that answer. So for example, if a question asks you to explain one acute response to exercise, you'd have to say the heart rate increases, okay, due to the body's increased demand for oxygen to the working muscles, therefore the heart beats more regularly to provide more oxygenated blood. If a question comes up saying compare and contrast, ensure that you provide information on both sides of the comparison. So for example, down the bottom it says compare the speed of muscle contraction for red and white fiber types. Here's your answer. Red fibers are slow to contract and white fibers are fast to contract. Unfortunately, in the past, a lot of students might just go red fibers are slow to contract, and that's how they leave it. Well, unfortunately, I understand that that implies that white fibers are fast. However, you need to specifically state everything you want the marker to understand and know. Include everything. You cannot assume the marker is going to know exactly what you're talking about, so make it clear and don't be lazy with detail. Now, one thing I've included for both is everything that you do, you have to support with relevant examples where possible, and try to relate those examples to the question. When you get asked to list, just use a dot point or use a table. Now, a few things that you need to know about the term list. If it says list all, okay, list as many as you can and the order doesn't really matter. However, if the question says, for example, list 2, or if it says list 3, if it says list 2, the marker can only award marks for the first 2 items that you list. Even if you mark 10 and the bottom 8 are all correct, but the first 2 are wrong, you will get 0. So I'm always encouraging you guys, if a question comes up with list or identify, always include your best answers first. Get your best and most obvious answers on the paper first, then worry about the ones that you're not sure of or, might not be as relevant to the question. Now, look at the marks before you answer the question. The amount of allocated marks is going to give you a good idea about what kind of information and how much information the marker is looking for. So let's look at this example on the next page. So don't worry about reading the background question. What I want you to focus on is here. Explain the process of using a checklist. Now, this is motor learning and coaching. If you don't know the answer, it doesn't matter. We look over here and it says 3 marks. Straight away, I know that there should be 3 things that I need to talk about. Funny thing is, when you look at the marking key as provided by WACE, it says maximum of 3 marks. Okay, written right there. And there's 4 possible things that you could talk about. And you need to provide an explanation for each. So you could have talked about preparation, observing, providing feedback, or evaluate improvement. Okay, so you would have had to have talked in detail about 3 of those things. So make sure you look at the allocated marks and ensure that for every single mark you have one clear keyword or point that you define and explain. Okay, I think it's really good that you can see and look at yourselves for a good and bad example of a short answer response. So I'm going to start with a poor response taken from a 2014 paper. The question reads, and it is from functional anatomy, so don't worry too much if you don't understand the question. Define the term motor unit and describe the difference between a small motor unit and a large motor unit. Let's look at this question. 3 marks allocated. I look at this question now and I go, first thing it asks me to do is define the term motor unit. There's probably 1 mark. Then it says describe the difference between a small motor unit and a large motor unit. Well, there's your other 2 marks. Defining and describing a small motor unit and a large motor unit. So here's your example of a poor response. A small motor unit is responsible for movement in smaller muscles such as the biceps. A large motor unit is bigger than a small motor unit and gives movement to larger muscles such as the quadriceps. Straight away, no definition, no attempt to define the term motor unit. 1 mark's already lost. The descriptions that this person has given are very vague. There's no specifics given, and straight away the marker is probably not going to give any marks. And according to the marking key, this person actually achieved 0 out of 3. Let's look at a good response on the next slide. Here we go. A motor unit is comprised of the motor neuron, dendrite, cell body, axon, and motor end plates, and corresponding muscle fibers. Brilliant. We have a clear definition and a detailed definition of what a motor unit is. 1 mark. A small motor unit has only a few muscle fibers for every motor neuron. This is for fine motor movement / accuracy. Example, muscles in the eye. A large motor unit has many muscle fibers for 1 motor neuron. This is for gross motor movements, power, e.g. quadriceps. This is brilliant. We've clearly talked about a small motor unit. We've said what it is, so we've defined it, and we've provided an example. And we've done the same for a large motor unit. And as you can probably guess, 3 marks were achieved. So this is what you need to be setting your responses like. Now, one other thing. 3 clearly defined dot points, 3 marks. Okay, a really good way to know if you've included enough is that your dot points should match up to the marks allocation. Okay, finally we're going to look at extended answer. Now, generally extended answer scores better than short answer. The reason being, the short answer marking keys are a lot more specific and you need specific terminology. In extended answer, quite often it's about backing up what you're saying and relating it to an example, which can be easier at times. The general way structure, 4 questions, 15 marks each, which means you're going to get a mark out of 30. You have to answer 2 of the 4 questions. Guys, please make sure you answer 2 of those questions. Usually those questions are made up of a part A and a part B of varying amounts. So part A could be 10, part B could be 5. Now, it's important that you understand that part A might come from one unit, such as motor learning and coaching. Part B could come from functional anatomy. They do that so that if you have stronger units, you can't necessarily get a question that's going to be very easy for you. Okay, so it's important that you're strong across all units. Now, what you need to do is look at all questions, look at part A and part B, and weigh up very quickly how you think you can go. So, for example, for question 1, I might be able to get 10 out of 15. Question 2, I think I can get 12. Question 3, I think I can only get 6. You do that for all 4 questions, and you weigh up which ones you think are going to be easiest for you to get your best marks in, and then you should answer those particular questions. What I want you to do is follow this procedure. It's called POTI. Okay, real easy to remember, POTI, and I'm going to explain that on the next slides. Couple of things. Marks are not given for an introduction, so just get straight into it. You don't need to go and restate the question or mention heaps about what you're going to talk about. You're going to start every single one of your dot points with a keyword. That's all you need, so don't worry about an introduction. If you want to do anything, no more than 1 sentence. Now, if you're running out of time at the start of that question, list down as much as you can. Everything that you're going to talk about, quickly jot it down. You might be able to scab some marks by doing that. I want you guys to get in the habits of using dot points. If you just write a bulk paragraph, so let's say it's 2 pages and you write bulk with no gaps between your answers, a marker can actually give you technically 2 marks. They can award 2 marks per paragraph if they want, and if you haven't broken it up with dot points, you may lose a lot of marks. Okay, so here's some examples. 1, communication. Ensure there is open and consistent communication between coaches and players. Okay, 2, hypoxic tense. Sleeping tense used to replicate living at altitude by reducing the partial pressure of oxygen. Now, this is really good. We start the dot point with the keyword that we're going to talk about. We then follow that with a definition. Now, I want you to press pause and actually read through the second question. And what you should notice is that we define it, and then we actually talk about specific advantages and disadvantages, and it all relates back to this dot point. Notice how I've also clearly talked about advantages, and I've clearly talked about disadvantages. From a marking perspective, it's a lot easier to give marks when you break it up like that, okay? Because it's clear and it's easy to find. If you don't break it up into the key parts, it's a lot harder for the marker to find it. They can get frustrated, and that's one reason why you might give a reason. You might actually give a reason for the marker to take marks away. Okay, so break it up into dot points and clearly separate the parts that you want to talk about. I mentioned it before, POTI, okay? Plan, order, dot point, define, explain, examples. This is the structure I want you to follow. Some of you aren't going to have to follow this. You're just going to do it naturally. For those of you that struggle in extended answer, so out of 30, I'm talking to anyone that's getting under 23 or 24, you should be starting to use this. So first thing you need to do is plan. So once you read the question, you need to write down all the key points that you're going to talk about. And I would suggest you use a mind map. Once you've written down those key words, you should find a logical order for them. Usually under every single topic you have, and the way we teach it, there's a logical order. Okay, so order those keywords according to what you know is correct. The idea behind that is that when you actually start writing your response, your dot points and your paragraphs should follow that order. The next thing is start off every paragraph with a clearly defined dot point. Okay, and that dot point should then be followed with a clear definition, which is the 4th point. So make sure you define your keyword. Once you've defined it, provide an explanation. So support your keyword with that explanation. Tell us as much as you can about it, but relate it back to the question. So is it compare, is it justify, is it describe, etc. Finally, always include an example. Now I can guarantee you every single marking key you come across will provide or ask for a specific example to the question. Never turn around and say, in this question, there's no specific example I could use. However, I would use this. Okay, straight away you will get no marks. There's always an example you can use. You just have to think about it and come up with one. Here's an example of a plan. Really well done, real simple. Okay, it's a motor learning and coaching question. Don't worry too much if you don't understand it. But the question says, describe, using a qualitative analysis model, what processes you would go through to help with his kicking action. Okay, so this question's asking about a qualitative analysis model. Okay, once you've done motor learning and coaching, you know it's about Knudsen and Morrison. So they've written Knudsen and Morrison down in the middle. But they've looked at this question and said, okay, qualitative analysis, I need to define it. So they've written qualitative analysis there, and they've written a couple of keywords underneath that they're going to have to mention. With Knudsen and Morrison, they've written up here POEIR, which stands for Ponting owns every Indian R. Okay, and I'll explain that once you're doing motor learning and coaching. What that stands for is preparation, observation, evaluation, intervention, re-evaluation. So that's the process you're going to follow. You can see now that they've clearly labeled how they're going to talk about this. So first thing is define qualitative analysis. They'll then talk about preparation, observation, evaluation, intervention, and re-evaluation. And that's the order that's taught to you in your textbook and in your slides. Now this might seem stupid, but there are a lot of students in previous exams that get this order wrong. Okay, and if you get the order wrong, you lose marks. It has to be in the correct order. Notice how they've also included a couple of keywords about what they're going to talk about. Okay, and that's really important. That's something you should do. It takes less than 2 minutes, and it can really help change your answer from maybe a 10 out of 15 to a 12, 13, 14 out of 15. So here's an example answer that they used, that they wrote using that plan. So qualitative analysis is the subjective assessment of performance against a set criteria. Straight away, there is a definition. Then you can see the dot points are all broken up. Preparation, observation, evaluation, intervention, re-evaluation. 5 clearly defined or outlined points, plus your definition at the top. That could have been done with a dot point. Okay, plus the relevant information. So you can press pause and read that if you want. I would suggest doing that. It's real simple, it's succinct, and it gets the message across straight away. So, last few things I'm going to talk about, some other tips. Unfortunately, you might not realize this now, but how well you do is clearly up to you. Okay? Some of you will go through and say, I can't get better, I can't get better. Well, unfortunately, guys, it's a decision that you're going to have to make towards committing to improvement. What that means is doing revision, being on top of your work, making sure you're on top of your work in other subjects. You have to do these things or it won't work for you. One thing that's a real shame is when students finally realize once they've had the kick up the butt in about term 2, once they've done their semester 1 exam, is that they actually want to do better. And kids can sometimes go from getting 30s in the semester 1 exam to high 60s or almost 70 in the semester 2 exam. The problem is they've lost so many marks in semester 1 that it's hard to bring up their average. So, a few things. Make the effort. You're only going to get out what you put in. Make sure you prepare early. Don't cram the night before. Be on top of your preparation and your revision. One other thing, you come first. Do not waste your own time helping others. Now, I'm not saying you can't go and revise together and help each other out, okay? But don't go off and spend heaps of time helping other people if it means you're taking away from your own revision time. One last thing. We're your teachers, guys. We know what we're talking about. We've put kids through this before. We've seen a bunch of students that have had all different problems with learning the content. We know something that'll work for you. So listen to what we tell you and actually do it. Don't just nod your head and smile like an idiot. Put in place the advice and the tips that we tell you. So guys, it's up to you now, okay? I've told you how I think you can improve your response writing. The rest is for you to go out and actually practice doing it. So I want you to go, grab some past papers, practice planning, practice writing responses, and once you've done that, start timing yourself. Allow 1.5 minutes per mark. So if it's a 6-mark question, allow yourself 9 minutes and get used to writing under pressure. A few other things you can do. Learn the content. Take that content and simplify it down into your effective study notes. Make sure you use your class time wisely. Ask the teachers questions. Get the help you need. Don't waste your time. Get familiar with all previous marking keys that we give you, okay? That will give you really good ideas about how much detail you're going to have to answer in specific questions. Make sure you practice your questions under time limits. And guys, I'm going to say it once more, ask us for help. That's what we're here for, okay? Well, I hope this helps. If you have any other questions, please come up and ask us. We're going to work on this throughout the whole year, and hopefully we can take your responses from low marks to middle, and hopefully by the end of the course from middle to high. But every single person in this course can improve. There is not one student that's already at 100%. So everyone should be using this information.